Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And today our special guest being brought back by second request, Pull Your Heels with Lillian. Her guest, Vicki Benjamin, who formed the company Corner Blue Capital, investing for a better tomorrow, and especially in terms of the animals, those exotic animals, although they're not being so exotic anymore. So good morning, Vicki. How are you this fine? Well, it's a nice day here in Pennsylvania. So wherever you are, I hope the sun is shining with the sky blue.
I am. Thank you very much, Lillian, and hello to all your listeners. I'm located in Bethesda, Maryland, and it is a beautiful, nice, breezy day. And just happy to be able to share some of my ideas with your listeners. And I appreciate the opportunity.
I wanted to have you back because there's so much more that we can touch on. And since you are coming back, even though it's towards the end of the epidemic, of course, rumor has it will be back, kind of like a bad penny. How have you found things to be in the investment world, what with the initial 3-month lockdown and now that a lot of states are beginning to open up again?
So we see a lot of trepidation with retail investors. It's somewhat, we just launched our mutual fund, the Corner Blue Animal Impact Fund, back in September. We did fairly well performance-wise, and then the pandemic came. And the markets are so volatile that I believe there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines waiting to go back into more structured products like mutual funds. That said, we're seeing something very unusual in the investment markets, and something your listeners are probably doing themselves, is that there is quite a few mom-and-pop investors, if you would, that see such volatility as an opportunity to take advantage or to partake in the stock market. So a lot of folks are going into stocks, say, for instance, like Hertz, that's going through bankruptcy and hoping, that it'll come out of bankruptcy and they'll reap many profits. So they're going in with the zest. And so the markets are really what we like to call in the management world frothy. And right now, today, just before I got on the phone with you, I think the market's down 700 points. And so much as you have to manage your outside and personal life through this pandemic, managing an investment product through this kind of much volatility is especially challenging.
So what would a person do if they would like to invest because the market is going up and down, and they feel like, well, this is something I want to try and help save the animals that we do have left, especially the ones that reside in Africa, which seems to, although India, they have a lot of elephants over there and tigers. And these places really are under assault by the population because these are poor countries to start out with.
Right.
And they don't have a real good layer of protection the way the Western nations do when something like a pandemic hits them and their source of economic in terms of agricultural wealth isn't there the way it is with a wealthier Western nation.
So I think if I could pause you for one moment, because this is really, one of the few people I've talked to that understand this point. I actually had a conversation with some folks at the UN about this. So let's just take, for example, one of the known cause of Ebola was bushmeat, right? There was a chimpanzees found dead, and these people in protein-ravaged countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, for instance, they live off bushmeat. And so when you are, and as much as big companies will try to discourage the eating of bushmeat, which can be even endangered species, it still happens. So let's just say a pandemic comes along, and some of these folks, as you know, Lillian, make pennies a day. So trying to dissuade them when they can't feed their family from not engaging in the practice of eating bushmeat or wild animals, coming in contact with those wild animals, is a really high-risk behavior. And a lot of folks don't extrapolate the pandemic and the economic implications across these poorer nations and what the impact will have on not only the people, but the animals around them.
And that's something that you don't really take into consideration. For example, the show Naked and Afraid, Wealthy Americans Go Out to Survive, when people in the poor third world nations have been naked and afraid for hundreds of years. And to them, what these people are doing is kind of playing at their survival. And then their kids don't live because they can't get the proper protein in them, neither can they have access to the field to plant the proper bean protein that may be available to them. I mean, people in the U.S. don't understand this concept too well, unless you come from a far part of the country in which getting the proper type of food is accessible as well.
That's correct.
And the bushmeat that people find when there's roadkill from squirrels, possums, raccoons, and deer.
And as we all know, at least this pandemic has origination with wildlife and wet markets. So the more, and as the earth evolves and we become more populous and need more resources, we are interconnecting with nature more and more. And the more that we contact with nature, where these unknown viruses lurk, we basically are shaking the trees of pathogens. And this will continue to happen the more that we encroach on wild areas and areas of significant biodiversity.
Now, some people may say that, like artists or other people who create something, when they die, whatever they have created increases in wealth. And I can really see somebody using this type of reasoning by saying, well, if we kill off a certain species, that which is left will improve the money value of our portfolio. Has anybody bring up that kind of argument yet with you?
So what exactly, so can you give me an example of that, Lillian? So you're saying that if they were to kill off...
If people have created, there are people now who are poaching the animals within the forests in Indonesia and India and some of the world countries. And in their mind's eye, they do not feel like they're taking something that should be off limits to them. In their mind's eye, it is their right to take this food because it's fair for them to take. And the same thing can be said about the oceans where people, I'm not talking about the indigenous people and that's wrapped up in their culture. I'm talking about the fish farms that are out there where people go out and they fish until there's practically nothing left of that particular species left in the ocean. And we have seen that in some respect for fish like tuna, for example. People pay $20,000, $30,000 for one fish, and yet if you're trying to set up a fund to preserve what fish there is left, isn't that a contradiction of terms?
Well, it's a way of greenwashing. You're able to do something bad and then pay for it on another way, right? So conservation's complicated. I'll give you an example. Botswana has a elephant problem, and they had an elephant problem a year ago, and they had a moratorium on shooting elephants. The problem was they had more elephants per square foot than in any other country. And they also are a poor country in Africa. And the elephants, there's an economic problem, right? Because the elephants, because there's so many of them, they were trampling on farmers' crops and actually hurting some people in certain instances. So Botswana government lifted the moratorium on hunting animals at the request of the people because there were so many elephants. And there would have been, had we been able to, conservation really requires the work of stakeholders working together. So had the U.S. government or even Zimbabwe and Botswana been able to work together or Nigeria, so that some of the animals could have had their migration pattern changed and they could have migrated over, but there happens to be quite a bit of landmines on their migratory path, so that wasn't working. But had the governments worked together and tried to clean that up, or had there been an economic stimulus given to Botswana to pay those farmers, then we wouldn't have an invitation to come in and hurt the elephants. So I don't think there's anybody on this planet that thinks the world has too many elephants. It just happens to be there's a lot of them in one spot. So conservation requires the work of a lot of stakeholders together. And often the other problem is that the private markets, Lillian, I'm a private market person. I'm using the capital markets and the behavior of corporations. I'm trying to change behavior of corporations. When you're talking about trophy hunting and you're talking about bushmeat, you're talking about usually individual behaviors. And so when you're talking about consumers or individuals and how they treat animals, most often the most effective way is to deal with them through governmental legislation.
So any animal then that's under the protection of a conservation most likely will be protected, but if the individual governments do not make some kind of arrangements to get the animal somewhere else, then they're at risk of being destroyed.
That's correct. I mean, there's the economics of where those animals, the African animals, I mean, it's tough, right? And so the problems now are the pandemic over in Africa, not so much conservation of animals. For instance, I know that I think it's Algeria only has 200 respirators, and millions of people. So there's a human crisis right now, and I think that a lot of animal issues are taking a backseat to that, and understandably so. But we need to be able to ensure that we establish certain safeguards. But the animals are at great risk right now.
I would think so. Now, when you start a trust or an investment portfolio on individual animals for companies or corporations to invest in, what kind of animals do you consider providing a portfolio on for companies to invest in? Do you have a set type of animal, or is it something that is in terms of a conservation effort? How do you determine which animal would be a good investment for a company to invest in?
So our product is a mutual fund, and then we also have some separately managed accounts, and they are they are investing in companies that have the best standards towards the preservation of biodiversity and animal welfare in their industries. So in the mutual fund, we cover wild animals and we cover captive animals. So we invest in certain pharma companies that are working to find alternatives to using animals in scientific testing. We work with a few agricultural companies that honor the 5 freedoms for farm animals, and we work with a lot of large extractive companies and companies that impact the lives of wild animals, and they can be wild animals anywhere where these companies have operations, often in Malaysia or Africa, where, for instance, one thinks of metals and mining. So you're talking about wild animals like gorillas and tigers and elephants. So we have some portfolios, separately managed accounts, that are concentrated on wild animals, and we have some portfolios that are concentrated on animals in captivity. But there's no specific animal. It's a type of either captive animals or wild animals.
Would animals in zoos come under your captivity of animals?
Well, there is no public zoos held. The only one there is would be the only one I can think of, and which would never be in our portfolio, would be SeaWorld, of course. We're totally
right. Yeah. No, I wasn't
SeaWorld.
thinking of
So we work with some zoos. We collaborate with some zoos because, at Carnivore Capital, we do not believe in roadside zoos. We are totally supportive of Carol Baskin and Big Cat Rescue, and what she's doing to try to save the tiger and try to save the tiger species is amazing. And she's trying to single-handedly to fight in Congress to get roadside zoos eliminated. But large public zoos where the animals are kept in good environments, they give people the ability to socialize a little bit with these animals and to respect them and to learn about them. We know many folks that say, for instance, we know folks at San Diego Zoo and certainly the Smithsonian Zoo here in D.C. So, but there's not really an opportunity to, because they're not owned by a corporation, we can only work with them and consult with them when we think of issues of animals in captivity.
Okay. I was wondering, I know that there are several zoos in England that are facing problems financially. And David Attenborough got involved with it, saying, what do we do? Just let them starve to death because we don't have the funds to take care of them. So I was just wondering.
How has that been? I haven't heard about that. Was it resolved or what happened?
It's not resolved. I think because of the pandemic, revenue just dropped out of the bucket. And they have no means. And I think there are 2 or 3 really large zoos in England that are facing problems in trying to take care of their animals. And the thing of the matter is, what do you do when you take an animal, a wild animal, domesticate them as much as possible, which is what they do in the zoo. You can't take them out of the zoo and put them back in the wild again. Some of them have been born in captivity on top of that, and they don't have the skills that a wild animal would naturally develop as they're growing from cub to adult. And I'm just appalled by how it's being handled. So I was wondering if your company would ever consider working with public zoos.
Absolutely. And as you know, we have an associated foundation that actually works on many of the non-public company, for instance, like zoos issues. So I'm gonna bring that up with the president of the foundation, because that is exactly the kind of work that we can get involved in.
I believe I found the article in the Washington Post.
Really?
They had a pretty good, I'm not, I read a lot of newspapers too. So I'm not.
You are a busy lady. You're a busy lady. And I'm embarrassed and saddened that I missed this. So usually I have a lot of people that we can also post it on our social media. I'd like to follow up with them.
Well, it's something that he doesn't really get involved all that often out in the public eye. He's in his 90s, I think. It's mid-90s by now. And I could say that I would be upset as well if I thought there was no answer to save a zoo, which was originally put together to have people become aware of the wider world and the different animals that populated the wider world. and bring it in. So I would be very upset if I knew, for example, that the zoo, they have a zoo in Cleveland, Ohio, was to be destroyed because they no longer had funds to take care of all the animals that they have populated that zoo with. And that zoo is endless. You could walk all day and still not cover more than a quarter. Let me tell you, I was there a lot of time with my child. We spent a lot of time at the zoo. And it's like a world unto itself because it was so full of different animals and different animal species. And they put in a rainforest, and then they put in something akin to the Sahara to give people an idea of what kind of environments and climates these animals live in and everything. So my son spent, I would say, half his life in the zoo and the other half in the Museum of Natural History. I mean, that was his background stomping yard, and it was good for me to take him down there because I knew he could absorb a lot of things and be perfectly safe should he stray a bit, because most kids do stray. It's in their nature. So, Vicki, tell people how they want to try to become involved in a mutual fund with captive or animals that are 3 steps away from extinction, how they go about getting involved in such a project?
Well, they can go to our website, carnerbluecapital.com, and there is an Invest Now section that will take you right to an application that you can fill out and mail in. You can, alternatively, there's a phone number. You can call and you can reach out and talk to me, or you can talk to our distributor. It's very easy. It takes 5 minutes to fill out the application. You can mail a check, or you can call one of us, and we would be more than happy to help you, because we are trying to improve the lives of animals globally, and through either our KBC, Carner Blue Capital, through the capital markets, or through Carner Blue Center for Humane Economy, the foundation, and I'm definitely going to follow up on this zoo issue. There is no animal that isn't within our reach, and so this is your listeners. There's many ways that we can work together to help animals.
Now, some people would say, "Well, I have to be a millionaire in order to invest."
No, we have a $2,000 minimum. I made this a product for the people because I think virtually everyone cares about an animal and many animals, and this is a product for everyone.
Would you consider it possibly also a good investment for somebody's portfolio as part of a retirement account?
Absolutely. We hold over 100 stocks in the mutual fund, so it's a very diversified portfolio, and it's a lot. We encourage long-term investment. We are not day traders, and we spend a lot of time looking for the companies of tomorrow for you to invest in today. So we are looking for real transformative companies, and it's a great strategy.
I think so too. I would not consider it a high risk, ladies and gentlemen. If you're trying to put money aside for your kid now, who's 2 and 3, for college, which is 16, 17 years away, this would be a really good investment, not only for your child but for the animals, because it's a win-win situation. And surely you want your grandchild to know what an elephant or a giraffe looks like besides going to see a 3D display at the Museum of Natural History. You want the real thing, I'm pretty sure.
Amen to that.
I mean, I know I studied dinosaurs from what fossils I found, but it's a lot better if you can actually see them in the flesh. It gives you an appreciation that this is also human life that needs to be respected. So, Vicki, please give everybody your website information, email, phone number, where they can find you on social media.
Okay, carnerbluecapital.com is our website. All of our direct phone numbers are on there, carnerbluecapital.com. My name is, and you can reach me directly at vicki.benjamin@carnerbluecapital.com. please follow us on KBC Investments on Instagram. We have a Karner Blue Capital Facebook page as well. And I guess that covers it. That covers Karner Blue Capital and how to contact me. You can absolutely, there's a number right on the website to reach me directly. And Lillian, if any of your folks or listeners have any questions or concerns related to animals and they'd like me to follow up with a certain company, etc., I'd be more than happy to do that. We never stop over here because the animals don't stop.
Exactly. So if you have any concerns about animals being used for experimentations or vaccines and you're against it, let Vicki know.
I'd be delighted. That's how we find information. It's not that easy to get it from the companies.
Absolutely not. And yet it's one little step of how you can make yourself a participant in making things better in the animal world. So thank you all very much for listening with Cool Your Heels, special guest Vicki Benjamin. You can hear this all over again at https://Passionate World Radio, PassionateWorldTalkRadio.com. Menu, right-hand side of the page, Cool Your Heels with Lillian. Scroll down, click on me. You can also hear it on Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. on AMFM247.com, YouTube, Spreaker, Amazon, Alexa, Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and a host of podcast directories. And before you go away and stray, Kierkegaard had this to say in 1843, most men pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that they hurry past it. So thank you all very much for listening. And remember, please keep listening. Thank you.